The Great Resignation has just been the acceleration of something that at some point in their lives, everybody does.
Yeah.
At some point, everybody has a look at where they are, where they're going, and what's happening now.
Yep.
And decides to change it. It's just that we don't usually see it because it's dispersed among the many millions of people that are not doing that. Collectively, it's something that's happening in a moment in time.
So joining me on the call today, I've got Sarah Higgins from the Helping Hands Group. Welcome to the call, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, David.
Pleasure. So maybe tell us a bit about Helping Hands and what it's all about.
Well, the Helping Hands Group is an Australian-based group of virtual assistants and software consultants. Mm-hmm. And there's 4 in the group, including myself. I'm the owner.
Yep.
And our job is exactly what the tagline says. It's our job to make business easier. And we do it by allowing business owners to outsource the things that they should not be doing themselves.
Yeah. And outsourcing, I suppose, with the whole idea of virtual has now become a commonplace for everyone, hasn't it?
Oh, very much. If there's one positive the pandemic brought, it's that it has dramatically escalated the growth of virtual services within Australia. It was always coming, but it's fair to say the pandemic gave it a big shove.
Yeah. And I think the other side of that is people are starting to realise the validity that it's not necessary to have an office full of people anymore. We just need people to do specific jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And even there's been a lot of talk about the Great Resignation. Have you got a view on that?
I think the Great Resignation has been a long time coming. The Great Resignation has just been the acceleration of something that at some point in their lives, everybody does.
Yeah.
At some point, everybody has a look at where they are, where they're going, and what's happening now.
Yep.
And decides to change it. It's just that we don't usually see it because it's dispersed among the many millions of people that are not doing that. Collectively, it's something that's happening in a moment in time.
Yeah, and it's global. And, it's sort of like, I look at it this way. We use 40-hour weeks as a benchmark, as a baseline. You work full time, you work 40 hours a week, you work for 40 years, you get a gold watch. And it sounds weird when I say it that way, but that's the legacy. The whole idea of the industrial age was that people worked on production lines and they worked certain hours and you got paid for your time. We've moved into a world where we are in the communication age or the information age, depending on how you look at it. And I don't really want to pay people for their time anymore. I want to pay people for the value they provide me. And I think when we talk about the Great Resignation, people are starting to say, hang on, I don't need to work 40 hours a week. I can work 32, or I can work 27, or I can work whenever I feel like it. And even like the sort of businesses like Uber, where I had to get in Uber cars for a while because I had an injury and I couldn't drive. And I always asked the Uber driver, what led you to become an Uber driver? And they said, you know what I love about Uber the most? And it's not the money, because they don't pay very well. They said it's the flexibility. If I feel like working, I turn my phone on and I'm available and I get a job. And if I feel like taking 2 hours off, I turn my phone off and I go and take 2 hours off. So I think it's been in the wings for a while. And what you say is true. It's now just become this reality that people prefer working when they want to work.
That was certainly one of the driving factors behind why I started Helping Hands. It was to get the flexibility that I couldn't get at the time through a standing employer.
Yeah, fantastic. So let me ask you, what makes you different? There's a lot of virtual assistants out there. What makes the Helping Hands Group different?
Probably the biggest difference is that we do run as a group.
Right.
It is very unusual at the moment for virtual assistants in Australia to run in a group situation. Most of them are solos. And they do have backup through subcontractors and so on. But the fact that we work as a group makes us more flexible in terms of the range of services that we can offer.
Yep.
And also makes it far less likely that we're going to have to say, we can't do that, either because I'm unwell or on holidays or I don't have a particular skill set. That's what the rest of my team is for.
Yeah, right. Okay. And let me ask you your why. You touched on it before, how you were triggered into taking this as a business opportunity. So can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I started Helping Hands 6 years ago when my now 9 and 8-year-olds were 3 and 2.
Okay.
And at the time I knew I needed to go back into the workforce, but I didn't want a traditional job as such.
Yeah.
And what I was trained for, which was IT training, isn't necessarily the most family-friendly position in the world. And I went to an expo on careers for mums. And while I was there, I stumbled across another virtual assistant who, in addition to running a VA business in her own right, runs a school on teaching people how to be VAs.
Yeah, right.
And talking to her, I came home and went, that's it. That's what I need to be doing. And 3 weeks later, with a homemade website, a packet of business cards, and a massive amount of completely unearned confidence, I threw the metaphorical doors open and attracted my very first client talking to a children's entertainer in a play centre.
Wow.
And I haven't looked back since.
That's fantastic, isn't it? So it is interesting because it's definitely a way of the future, and it's opened doors to people who embrace it. It reduces costs in more ways than one. We're not paying full-time wages for someone who we don't need full-time. We don't need an office anymore because we can now just work remotely. And all the fears around working remotely have been sort of steamrolled by this whole lockdown scenario that's happened. Let me ask you, Sarah, what do you consider your superpower?
Oh, that's an interesting one. What do I consider my superpower?
Yeah.
I absolutely love learning.
Mm.
So I'm the person who always takes the longest to walk through a museum because I have to read every single word on every single wall. And it's like part of building a team meant that I had to learn how to be a boss.
Yeah.
And I often say it's probably it's both an indictment and a hallmark of my ability to manage that my very first employee got to the 4-month mark and said, I'm leaving because you're just not a good boss. And I went, I thought I was a good boss. And when she gave me the reasons why I wasn't a good boss, which is basically that, ironically, considering that we spend an awful lot of time teaching clients how to let go and outsource work, I wasn't letting go of the Helping Hands group and trusting my one employee at the time to do what she did best.
Yeah, right.
And I took that on and I learned from it. And so the fact that I love to learn and the fact that I can see when I need to learn is, I think, probably my superpower.
Yeah, awesome. And in that vein, if we talk about business advice that you've received along the way, what would you consider to be the best piece of advice that's sort of top of mind with you right now?
Yeah, I think my best piece of advice is also one of our company values. So we have a number of company values. We have internal ones and external ones. Mm-hmm. And our number one internal company value, Sarah is not always right. And that is on the desktop background of my employees' computers. Uh-huh. And it constantly challenges them not to do things Sarah's way just because Sarah is the owner.
Yeah, right. That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say just because you're running the business yourself doesn't necessarily mean you have all the answers. And more the point, you shouldn't be expected to have all the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And so obviously, being a reader and a learner, do you have any sort of authors or podcasts or things that inspire you? Like, what would you consider to be top of mind right now for that?
I've actually been reading Greg Roworth's series at the moment. So Greg is a Melbourne-based entrepreneur and business coach. He's actually my business coach. Yep. And I've been reading a lot of his material. Mm-hmm. And then on the completely other end of the scale, I've been reading Richard Branson's material. I just finished reading his Losing My Virginity and then moved on to Finding My Virginity. And although it was a completely different scale, like Helping Hands and the Virgin Group are two completely different sizes, I did learn a lot from those.
Yeah, fantastic.
Because I learned about the kind of business I want to run.
Yep, brilliant. And let me ask you, just in closing, advice to others. So other people in business who are sort of going through the current economy and the challenges that it brings, what's your advice to them?
Yes, look, I think it took the near loss of a very, very talented staff member who is still with me, I'm glad to say, because I did learn, for me to learn that I do not have all the answers and I cannot be expected to have. And as soon as any business owner, especially solopreneur, wakes up to that idea that you do not have all the answers, and more the point, you should not, and you can start relying on the experts to find the information or provide the support that you need. That's the biggest piece of advice. Do not expect to have all the answers. Yeah,
brilliant. Lovely. Sarah, look, very mindful of time. I appreciate the input. It's really good to get to know a bit more about you and how your business ticks. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.